Hello and welcome to the Bloodstream Podcast, a show serving the greater bleeding disorders community, brought to you by Believe Limited and Bloodstream Media and made possible thanks to our presenting sponsor, Takeda. I am your patient advocate and host, Patrick James Lynch.
And I am your healthcare advocate, your nonprofit nerd, and your other host, Amy Board, reminding you to please speak with a healthcare professional before making any treatment decisions.
I do wonder if we're ever going to change other host to something that's just a little bit more elevated, but I guess the answer is
no. It's true. I'm the other host.
And it is basically true, but nonetheless, we don't have time for this, though, because on today's show, we've got a lot to get to. You heard Trevor Martin's music leading us in, and Trevor Martin is one of our interview guests today. You'll hear more about him a little bit later on in the episode. Our latest gene therapy segment puts the focus on longevity. How long will gene therapy last? That's the key question that we answer today. We have an interview with two incredible midwives, Kimberly Durdin and Allegra Hill from Kindred Space LA, and Shanthi and Eliza from the National Youth Leadership Institute of the National Bleeding Disorders Foundation joined us as well. Yes, believe it or not, we have got all of that and probably even a little more on today's episode. Welcome to Bloodstream.
Listeners, we have so much that if you like what you hear, please subscribe wherever you get your podcast so you can get these things right in your podcast player when you want to listen.
I also want to remind you, dear listeners, that the Bloodstream Podcast is made possible thanks to our presenting sponsor, Takeda. That's right, Takeda. Takeda has got this website, bleedingdisorders.com, where you can learn all about Takeda's resources for and commitment to the bleeding disorders community. Takeda believes in a world free of bleeds, and they are dedicated more than ever in their efforts to offer a wide range of programs and support to help patients throughout their treatment journey, wherever on that journey they may be. And you can learn more by simply visiting bleedingdisorders.com. One more time, because I wrote it down over here, bleedingdisorders.com. And again, for their founding and ongoing support of the Bloodstream Podcast, I would just like to say thanks, Takeda.
Thank you, Takeda.
Amy Board, we have got one of the more jam-packed episodes we have had in a while.
But like kind of everybody's fantastic. So let's just get right into it. It's kind of awesome.
All right, so you're going to hear us talk about this. I've known Trevor Martin, a fellow blood brother with hemophilia, for a very long time. He's another creative. He's a musician whose music you've already heard. He's got some new music coming out that he's here to talk with us about, and that interview takes place right now. Trevor Martin, my friend, it is nice to see you again. How are you?
I'm great. Long time no see, man.
I know. I mean, we've known each other now for, 10 years or so?
At least 10 years.
But it has been a minute since we've actually seen each other in person or spoken on a podcast or done anything like that. So, man of music, what have you been up to in 2025? What's top of mind from the man of music and hemophilia?
Yeah, man, it's been awesome so far. I've already released 2 songs, one called My Forever, and then one that came out April 4th called Just Wait, and cracked 100,000 streams in 1 week. So that's awesome on Spotify. And just putting out a lot of songs, and honestly, kind of some stuff that I can't even talk about at this point, but some cool stuff going on in Nashville, and things are kind of moving in the right direction. So that's awesome.
I love it. Things that you can't quite talk about in music in Nashville. That's got to be good news. So I will stay tuned and wait for the time when you can talk about it. Yeah. What keeps you motivated to write? As long as I've known you, you've been a writer and a musician and a songwriter, a storyteller, but what keeps you motivated?
Man, honestly, my goals have changed a lot over the last few years. My goal when I moved to Nashville was just to make a career in music and make a living, make money to be able to sustain myself. And in 2024, I bought my first house in Nashville, bought a brand new car, and I kind of fulfilled those goals, which was really cool. So at the beginning of this year, I've kind of had to make new goals. And so I think that's what keeps me motivated, is just setting new goals, achieving those goals. And I've got a lot of, I've grown a pretty big fan base. And so I think what keeps me motivated is wanting to keep them fed and keep them consuming music that they love and having songs for special moments in their lives, like weddings and that kind of stuff. So that's really what motivates me the most.
That's interesting. Tell me more about your relationship to your fans. How do you interact with them? How do you engage with them? Because I imagine it could be something that you could spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week engaging if you wanted to. So how do you navigate engaging with fans?
I really love engaging with fans. It's really kind of one of my favorite parts of it all. So I've got about 700,000 followers across social media platforms now. And honestly, I post on TikTok every single day, at least 5 times a week. And so comments are huge, seeing what people comment to me. So I love to engage there. A lot of people use my songs for their own TikTok, for their own videos. And so that's another thing that I really love, is just being able to go in and comment on that. I do some TikTok lives now, and that's really cool to see people requesting my songs on TikTok live and just chatting with them. And yeah, so I think that's the best way that I've found to engage my fans, and also just to continue to release music and give them something new as often as I can, which, I've released about almost 30 songs in the last 4 or 5 years. Yeah.
Wow. How does it feel to say that out loud?
It's great. It's great. It's a lot of songs. It's a lot of songs. And there's even more songs on the cutting room floor that I'm like, this is a really good song, but it just doesn't make it to the finish line. But yeah, I mean, my goal is to release about 10 songs a year. I probably won't hit that this year, just with the little things that I have going on that I can't really talk about yet. But my goal is still to get at least 5 to 7 out this year.
Okay, well that's very cool. And how's your health? Obviously, hemophilia is what first connected us. How's your health? What can you tell us?
Man, I feel awesome right now. I have had no bleeds in, I can't even tell you how long. It's been years and years and years. It might have been, it might be 7, 8 years since I've had any type of bleed at all. And it may be longer than that. I can't even recall, but I feel great on a product that really works for me, and has helped a lot. So I never miss doses. That's my number one rule. And to anybody watching or listening here, if your doctor prescribes you your medicine and your dose, don't miss it. Don't just say, oh, I'll do this again next week, or I'll do it, whenever. No, if they tell you that's the best thing for you, and you should definitely stick to your regimen.
Now, what about your life outside of music, outside of things hemophilia related? Are you finding time to create balance for yourself? Are you struggling to find those pockets to refill the cup? And how are you dealing with stuff outside of music and hemophilia?
Man, I am a huge sports fan. I watch sports just about every single day. I'm looking to my left, and I got the Masters on over there on the TV, just playing in the background. But yeah, I've got great friends, got great family. My parents are awesome, and that's kind of just keeping a balance of good friends to talk about sports and girls and all that kind of stuff. So that's I'll always find time to carve out for those things.
So Trev, you mentioned 700,000 followers across social media. You're working on some cool projects you can't even talk about. Music's enabled you to buy a home in Nashville, your first car. To summarize what you'd said before, you've kind of lived the dream. You've met those goals that you once had and had to create new goals. But let's turn the clock back to when I met you as a young teenager, however long ago it was. You weren't buying houses and doing projects you couldn't talk about back then, right? So I think about where you are now and where you still are ascending to, and it's so exciting. But I want to speak to those people who might be listening, who have an interest in the arts or entertainment in some way, shape, or form, as a musician, as a painter, as anything artistic, expressive, creative. I think it can be very intimidating to look at someone successful and think, oh, how could I ever possibly get there? How could I ever possibly have 700,000 followers? How could I ever possibly be talking about projects I can't even yet tell people about? What would you say to those people who have an interest, have some talent, have some drive toward the expressive arts, but are intimidated or just don't see themselves as somebody who could ever take it into a career or level up with it in some way, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I think kind of just hearing that question, the first thing that comes to mind for me is no is okay. If someone tells you no, it's okay. Take that no, understand that no, and figure out why that no was a no, and correct that to where the next time that's going to be a yes. I've been told no many, many times, but I kind of just don't care that someone tells me no, and I try to learn from not even a mistake, but just learn from a no. And I keep pushing forward. I think that's the biggest thing, is just keep on doing what you love. If you keep doing what you love, you refine that no matter what. You keep getting better every time. The first song that I wrote, the first song that you probably heard me sing, was not the best song in the world, I'm sure. And even now, I'm not writing the best songs in the world. I'm just writing songs that are better than the day before. And, I think that's the biggest thing, is just getting a little better each day, a little better each month, a lot better each year. And then year over year, you're like, wow, I don't even recognize the person that I was when I started 10 years ago. So yeah, I think just accept your no's and make those no's become yeses.
Wow. I love that. Trevor, where are you most active? It sounds like TikTok, but where, if people want to follow along with you, your music, where are the best places to do that?
Yeah, the best places right now is Instagram, TikTok, and then Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube. I know that's pretty much all the places, but I'm releasing music like crazy on Spotify, and that's where you're really getting the tunes and the songs. So yeah, any of those places, Instagram, TikTok, Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, Trevor Martin or Trevor Martin Music, you can find a lot of songs there.
Perfect. Well, we'll put a few links in the program notes too, to make it easier for anybody who's listening or watching along on the stream. Trevor, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'd love to go out of this interview using one of your songs to lead us out. And I'd like you to decide on the spot which song that is and why it's the perfect song to lead us out of this interview. So here you are on the hot seat. What song should we use to lead us out, Trevor?
I think my most recent release, it would be awesome. It's called Just Wait. It just came out as we record this interview. It came out 1 week ago today, cracked 100,000 streams in 1 week, and a lot of people have really, really loved it and connected with it. So I would say use Just Wait. It's just a love song that's like, hey, if you think these are the glory days, just wait, because every day just keeps getting better and better. So I think that'd be a good song to take us out with.
I love that. Well, Trevor, thank you, man. It's always good to see you. Follow Trevor on social, links in the program notes, or look up Trevor Martin Music on Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, etc. And now let's take a listen to Just Wait.
I look around and don't know how I ever got this lucky. In a starter house, sitting on the couch with a perfect girl who loves me. We dreamed about this moment here together. You said I don't know how it ever could get better. Well, baby, just wait. If you think we have perfect right now, and if you're sitting there wondering how it gets better than today, well, baby, just wait. If I know one thing about us, it's every day we fall deeper in love. If you think these are the glory days, well, baby, just wait. Just wait. Before you blink, I'll buy a ring, and next thing you're changing your name. We'll have 2 or 3, they'll grow like weeds, and pencil marks will climb the door frame. But when our hair starts turning gray, I promise I'll still say, just wait. If you think we have perfect right now, sitting there wondering how it gets better than today, well, baby, just wait. If I know one thing about us, it's every day we fall deeper in love. If you think these are the glory days, well, baby, just wait, wait, just wait. We dreamed about this moment here together, and every time I swear it can't get better. Baby, just wait. If you think we have perfect right now, and if you're sitting there wondering how it gets better than today, baby, just wait. If I know one thing about us, it's every day we fall deeper in love. If you think these are the glory days, well, baby, just wait, wait, just wait. Well, baby, just wait, wait. If you think these are the glory days, baby, just wait.
Another incredible song by Trevor Martin. So look him up, Trevor Martin Music. Again, we'll have a link to the program notes. Trevor also wanted to make you aware, he mentioned the treatment option that he's on that's working really well for him. That treatment option is Hemlibra. And if you would be interested in learning more about Hemlibra and seeing if maybe it's the right treatment option for you, you can go to hemlibra.com to learn more. A link for that will also be in the program notes. Okay, moving on to our next segment on this loaded episode, Amy Board. Gene therapy, understanding longevity. So what's the focus of this segment all about today?
So in our next segment that's hosted by Hannah Berry, our wonderful new Bloodstream collaborator, we're so excited to have her. She's going to kind of get into it a little bit about how gene therapy is, how the data is looking, in particular, gene therapy for hemophilia B. So we're excited. Let's dig into it with our next segment sponsored by CSLBehring.
Welcome back to another segment of Gene Therapy, A Whole New World. It's your girl Hannah, and today we are infusing some fun knowledge into the numbers and real-world data shaping the future of treatments. Did you know 94% of participants in clinical trials were able to remain free of continuous prophylaxis treatment for 4 years after receiving the hemophilia B gene therapy? Let that sink in. 94%. And real-world data is beginning to mirror these findings, suggesting that this treatment isn't just effective in controlled settings, but also in everyday clinical practice. Clinical trials included participants ranging from 19 to 76 years old, proving that hemophilia B gene therapy is a viable option across a wide age spectrum. Notably, age of the participant did not impact the responses seen. Additionally, 52% of participants had a history of hepatitis C, and about 5% had HIV. Yet, as long as these conditions were well managed at the time of treatment, patients responded just as well as those without these prior conditions. Crazy. But before we infuse more fun facts into this conversation, it's a whole new world gene therapy segment brought to you by CSLBehring and their hemophilia B gene therapy treatment. To learn more about gene therapy, hear patient stories, and view additional resources, visit beyondhemb.com or download B Support wherever you get your apps for more information and to manage your treatment journey. Let's continue to dive in with Dr. Richard Lemons, who is a distinguished pediatric hematologist-oncologist based in Salt Lake City, Utah. Dr. Lemons serves as the professor in the Department of Pediatrics at the University of Utah School of Medicine and holds the positions of Medical Director and Chief of Pediatric Hematology and Oncology at both Primary Children's Medical Center and the University of Utah.
So we have 4-year data for the phase 3 Hope B trial that was initiated back in 2020. And then we also have some longer-term data, 6-year data, for the phase 2B trial that involved just 3 patients. So 3 patients were treated initially in the phase 2B trial to look at safety and efficacy. All 3 patients responded very well. And then 2 years later, the phase 3 larger trial of 54 participants took place. What the most remarkable thing is, I think, is that the mean factor IX levels have been durable and sustainable and very consistent over that 4-year period from year 1 to year 2, year 3, and year 4. Year 1, the factor IX level was 41.5%, so in the normal range. Year 2 is 36.7, year 3, 38.6, and year 4, 37.4. So we haven't really seen a change in that factor IX level. And that may be due to several things. Also, the safety data is very favorable as well. So these patients have done remarkably well. We treated 2 patients on the Hope B phase 3 trial here in Utah, and they are now over 5 years out from the initial treatment and are doing very well and have sustainable, durable levels of factor IX. So the durability and sustainability of that factor IX level and the really the high, mild, normal range for the mean value is quite remarkable. And it's particularly significant since this is a once-in-your-lifetime treatment. It's a single IV infusion in the outpatient setting. And the fact that this has now remained durable and stable consistently over that 4-year period with a very favorable safety profile really says that these patients have had a great response and have done very well overall. So I want to stop prophylaxis. Or the patient may say, I really want to engage in different activities and do things that I'm not able to do now that I hopefully could do if I underwent gene therapy and had a stable, durable level, and I knew what my level was day to day, week to week. So I think it really provides the opportunity now and confidence for providers to look at this as a long-term treatment option from a single infusion.
That's right. One-time infusions, potentially a lifetime of change. But how do we ensure we're capturing long-term outcomes? Well, that's where ATHN, the American Thrombosis and Hemostasis Network, comes in.
Now that it's commercially available, there are patients that are receiving it. And we're encouraging patients that do receive gene therapy to register in an Athens database. So, and Athens has created a database for all patients who are receiving gene therapy, whether it's hemophilia A, B, or even potentially other bleeding disorders. And so that information, hopefully, as patients register, and we can collect and track their factor levels, any adverse events, their quality of life. We can track all that data, hopefully over time, that then would be available to both providers and to patients to really look at gene therapies that are available or have been used to treat patients similar to any individual patient, to really look at that.
Real-world data, long-term monitoring. These are key to understanding the full potential of gene therapy beyond clinical trial setting. But how does real-world experience infuse into the comparison to what was observed in trials?
That's always a question that patients and providers ask and want to know is, we have a clinical trial data, but how well does that correlate with real-world data when patients actually receive the treatment? But I'm quite optimistic from my experience with our 2 participants, and then also, the published data and the data that's been presented for all 54 participants, that I'm optimistic that for patients that decide to move forward with a commercial product, that they'll have a similar experience and be able to stop prophylaxis or have a very good chance of stopping prophylaxis and having an improvement in their quality of life. So far, I think that's an important point for patients to know. If they do receive the commercial product, are they likely to have the same experience that patients did during the clinical trial? I'm quite optimistic that'll be the case for this treatment.
For many, stopping prophy isn't about convenience, it's about improving quality of life. And gene therapy has demonstrated this potential, but long-term monitoring is crucial.
So certainly when patients get out to the 6-month period after their gene therapy infusion, if they're doing well and don't have any issues or concerns, and their factor level is stabilized, which it certainly should be, then I recommend that patients continue with annual, once a year comprehensive visits, because they still may have issues from perhaps joint disease that they encountered prior to gene therapy or other issues. If it's an older patient, more of a senior citizen that received gene therapy, and the youngest patient in the clinical trial was 19, the oldest patient was 76. And there was no difference based on age in terms of response.
Wow, that is a very critical point, Dr. Lemons. Age is not a limiting factor, making this treatment option available to a broad group of eligible patients. But long-term monitoring remains essential, particularly for patients with prior conditions.
And for older patients, if they're at risk of any potential cancer, such as hepatocellular carcinoma, because of earlier risk exposure, if they had hepatitis B or C earlier on, or other conditions that might pose a risk of HCC, that they continue just to be monitored for that. There's no evidence there's been no cases of any malignancy resulting from gene therapy that targets the liver so far, but I think that's important for patients who have other risk factors that might pose a risk to continue to have their regular annual monitoring.
Gene therapy is changing the landscape of treatment for hemophilia B, offering patients the possible of freedom from regular infusions. But as with any new treatment, education and informed decision-making are key.
It's important for each individual potential patient to really think about it, what they hope to achieve from gene therapy, what their goals would be, and then to understand and learn as much as they can. The patients that have received it thus far have done very well and have had a really improvement in their quality of life. I've been able to stop, 94% of the participants are able to stop prophylaxis.
That's right, a single infusion, a potential lifetime without prophy, and data that continues to support gene therapy as a viable long-term option for many patients. But one of the biggest questions remains: how long will gene therapy last? As more individuals receiving treatment and real-world data accumulates, we're gaining more insights into durability, long-term outcomes, and how gene therapy could help shape the future of hemophilia care. Thanks for staying with us, folks, as that wraps up today's segment. But stay with us as we continue to infuse the fun into these conversations in our next episode. We'll be joined by Dr. Andrew Davidoff from St. Jude's Research Hospital, who will share his insights on the longevity of gene therapy. Thanks for listening, friends, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Hannah. That was amazing, as always. And Patrick, who do we have next? We have on this stacked episode. Who's like segment number 3?
I know. I feel like it's like an award show where it's like, next up we have, or some sort of, I don't know what it is, but we'll take a little sidestep from the world of bleeding disorders and talk a little bit about maternal health, women's health, maternal health, and particularly Black maternal health. So as longtime listeners of the podcast know, Deliver Us is a documentary that Believe Limited has been helping to produce for the last number of years. It spotlights the crisis that we have here in the United States as it relates to Black maternal health. And on the heels of Black Maternal Health Week, which just took place last week, we want to feature today this interview with 2 members of that film and the founders of Kindred Space LA, a Black-owned and operated midwifery center here in Los Angeles, Kimberly, Durdin, and Allegra Hill. They're outstanding midwives and they're excellent ambassadors for the importance of Black midwifery care as a solution to the Black maternal health crisis. So that's enough setup from me. Let's go listen to Kim and Allegra.
All right, listeners, so I'm joined now by Kimberly Durdin and Allegra Hill from Kindred Space LA. If you've been listening to the podcast for a minute, you may be familiar with them from their work in midwifery care, but specifically from a Bloodstream Believe Limited point of view. They are central figures in the documentary Deliver Us that is covering the Black maternal health crisis and proposes that Black midwifery care is perhaps a pillar of the solution. But let's start here. Kim and Allegra, would you each just introduce yourself and give us the kind of like 30-second back of your baseball card as to how you even got involved in maternal health care to begin with?
Well, I'll start. I'm Kimberly Durdin. I got involved in midwifery. I am a midwife, a licensed midwife in the state of California. I got involved in midwifery. I actually blame my children for bringing me into this work. Prior to having kids, I was working in fashion design and I was working in model and talent management. And my last day of that job, I gave birth to my daughter Yanni, who's 33 years old right now, and I have a total of 6 kids. And for all of my birth experiences, I was able to use a midwife, and this experience of using midwife was just life changing for me. And I knew that one day that I would want to become a midwife as well, and so that's how I got here.
That's beautiful. What about you, Allegra?
Yeah, so I'm Allegra Hill. I actually was born in the hands of midwives. So my impact that midwives had on my life happened before I was born, and that transitioned into like how my mom felt about her experience of birth and what she shared with birthing in a birth center. It just really encouraged me to know that midwifery was like a path that I could take. And so really, I found midwifery before I had my own children. I started attending births when I was in my late 20s. And it just feels like this is my life's calling. I'm really blessed to be able to do my passion and have midwifery be a part of my life for so long.
That's beautiful. There's already a couple things I'm tempted to follow up on, but I'm going to go to the next question I have on the list because I have a feeling some of this is going to come on back around. So how did the two of you connect and come to create Kindred Space LA? And maybe to oversimplify it here, what need were you hoping to address?
So Kimberly and I have known each other for quite a long time. When I was just entering birth work, Kimberly was an established member of the birth community, especially in her like childbirth education and lactation support. So we actually met at a local Los Angeles birth center, whereas I was a volunteer at first, and then I became a student midwife, and Kimberly was a part of the like education and lactation staff there at the time. And we connected, and we were able to support each other in our own births, and really our friendship blossomed to the point where we were like, we should work together to help to support more people in the community. So I think we started Kindred Space LA in 2018.
Yeah, 2018.
And so we've been building and growing and offering more services really ever since.
Yeah. And just to add to that, there wasn't at the time, even though Black birth workers and Black midwives have been around since the beginning of time, at the time in LA, it didn't seem like there were a lot of us. And so I already had kind of like this vision from when I started having my own children that I would want to do this work one day. And I was kind of actively looking for people that looked like me, that were from the same similar background and wanted to do the same type of work. So when I saw Allegra walking into this birth center that I used to work at, I was kind of like, So I kind of really just felt that we could work together eventually one day. And that's what we did.
We had kind of a lot of connections too. It was the birth center. We actually both went to the same church.
Yeah.
We didn't know each other there. And then people oftentimes think that we're related because we favor each other so much.
Yeah,
so,
like her mom looks like my mom. So, it was, as a matter of fact, when we were all involved in the same spiritual community. Allegra's mother is a really well-respected Reverend, New Thought minister, and my family adores her mother. We hadn't met Allegra yet, but we adore her mother. And
she's the bomb.
She's awesome. And so I remember one day going up to her mom at church and being like, "Your daughter is so awesome." And she kind of looked at me probably like, "Huh?" And I was like, "Your daughter is very special." And it was just, but anyway, she's awesome. She's Allegra's mom also always opens our birth worker training that we have, our doula training that we hold every year or every other year. She opens it, and sometimes it closes the training because she is just magnificent. And yeah.
Wow. Okay. So I have so many questions, but I'm cognizant that many listening may not really appreciate some of the differences between things we're referencing: birthing centers and hospital births, a midwife, a doula. Is that different than an OBGYN or a delivering physician in a hospital? So before I kind of dig in with you both, can you just set some foundation for us? What exactly is a midwife? How does that care differ from, say, a doula? How is a birthing center? I know this is a complex question, but just thinking about people for whom this may be entirely new to think about, what's the best way to clarify it?
Yeah, so a midwife is like right now we're in the state of California. So in the state of California, a midwife is licensed by the medical board. So we are able to do medical tasks. So you can get your prenatal care with a midwife. You can also do conception work with a midwife. We can do IUIs. You can have a midwife in the lens of really like reproductive care. So you would see a midwife for your pregnancy. They would attend to you in your birth, either in a home or a birth center setting. There are also midwives that work in hospitals. So you could have midwifery care in a hospital, depending on what kind of system you're in. And then you have your postpartum care from your midwife. So a doula is more like a support person that is not medically trained. So they are a person who is by your side, offering education, physical and emotional support, also kind of guiding you. They're more like a Sherpa around birth. Whereas a midwife would be kind of more equivalent to an OBGYN in the hospital where you're under this person's care. They can be your primary care provider. And then the great thing about midwives is like we tend to be less interventive than like what you would have in the hospital. So you're still having a birth and like maybe you don't have that many medical procedures, but your midwife is still able to do them if it's necessary.
Right. And I think what differentiates midwives from OBs, a lot of things actually, because OBs are surgeons, they're trained to do surgery and do cesarean sections, which are surgery and things of that nature. And also they're trained to deal with more high risk pregnancies and things when things aren't within the range of normal. Midwives do their best to uphold and hold space for the physiologic process of birth. We are a great part of the birth team because our approach to birth is not to start doing stuff. It's to actually, throughout our prenatal care, keep healthy people healthy and help somewhat healthy people get healthier so that they can have the best chance to deliver their baby in the most physiologic, the most intervention-free way. And we just don't start with interventions right away, including like an IV. A lot of people, if they go to the hospital for childbirth, the first thing that happens is they're going to get an IV. And we believe in midwifery care, like it's just not necessary for everyone. A lot of the things that we do in midwifery care are low intervention. Also, we're not charging for every little thing that we do. So sometimes in the hospital system, some things are done because there's going to be a payment that they're going to get back for that. So that's a whole nother challenge and issue. But we only do medical things that are medically necessary within our scope. And if someone needs something beyond what's our scope, we're happy to help them get into care with a physician, or even a midwife in the hospital can sometimes help some of our clients. And part of our work is to build really beautiful relationships with some of these amazing birth providers that are physicians, that are midwives in the hospital.
And really, midwives are experts at normal birth. Mm-hmm. And OBs are specialists for abnormal birth. So it's interesting that we really, people always want to know, what can a midwife do? Can a midwife give me an IV? Can a midwife give me stitches? And the answer is like, yes, midwives are able to take care of a majority of normal birth. And it's so fun because a lot of times we don't have any need to do any intervention. I think it's maybe something like, of the births that are happening here, maybe 85% of the births, we use no medical intervention, which is like amazing. It's like, I'm wondering in the hospital, what percentage of births are happening without any medical intervention? It's going to be 1% or so. Whoever just comes in pushing, and then even that person is getting postpartum Pitocin, which they may or may not need. So maybe that number is 0. So it's just really, how do you assess your own risk level? And then how do you get yourself as a pregnant person in the care of somebody who actually knows how to take care of you?
Wow. Such rich information. And for your knowledge and for the listeners, and some may know this, at the time we're recording, we are about 10, 12 hours from my daughter's 4th birthday. And we had a home birth. And in fact, a mutual connection, Hayes, was the doula for my wife in our home birth, and we were in the care of a midwife. But my wife had a retained placenta, which meant that post delivery we had emergency transfer and a very scary but necessary time at the hospital. We did record for this podcast about that. So Keith, let's throw a link to that in the program notes for any of our birth world fanatics now who are listening. If you want to deep dive that story, much of what you just heard Allegra and Kim speak about with respect to the midwife's care and philosophy, the role of the doula, the integration of the team, Natalie and I experienced firsthand and talk about in that episode. So it may be relative to share, but I want to bury the lead here. So we're talking about important work, and we're talking with lovely human beings who are positive and excellent storytellers. But the reason that we're talking and even know each other in the first place is because there is a capital C crisis in America when it comes to Black maternal health. And maybe you've heard that said, listeners. Maybe you've heard Black maternal health crisis. It's a catchy phrase. It's accurate. But do you know what it means? Because I'll say, I heard you mention this earlier, and I don't know if it's still true, Kim and Allegra, but when I was first introduced to your work and Kindred Space, I was introduced to it as the first and only Black midwifery center in Los Angeles, not in rural Idaho. No disrespect to rural Idaho, but here we are in coastal Los Angeles. I'm told that we are all behaving in one particular kind of way. And then I learned that there's no Black midwifery center before Kindred Space LA. Well, ain't that interesting? So paint the picture. What is the Black maternal health crisis? How widespread is it? What do people need to know about this?
Wonderful. That's a great lead in. That's a rich question. I will say we are not the first Black-owned center in Los Angeles, which is great. And often we don't know the history of the folks that came before us. I will say that we do have a rich history of Black midwifery in Los Angeles, starting with, or maybe not starting with, but one of the folks that we know who made a huge impact in Los Angeles is a person named Biddy Mason. And most people do not even know who this incredible being is. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, they're just as important as Harriet Tubman, honestly. Like, everybody should know who Biddy Mason is if you're in California or just across the nation. And so I'll leave you with that teaser. But Biddy Mason is so special and so important. She was a midwife, that there's a monument to her in downtown Los Angeles at 333 Spring Street at the site of one of her first property purchases. And she became one of the wealthiest women in Los Angeles, doing her work as a midwife, a formerly enslaved person, and then was also not only just wealthy, but a huge philanthropist, and helped so many people in Los Angeles. And really, she's not only like a patron saint of Los Angeles, but she's a patron saint of midwifery, of Black midwifery, to us and for our community who knows of her. Another really amazing Black midwife in Los Angeles is a woman named Lola Coleman, who is a more modern Black midwife who was operating a little under the radar in our community, but established her practices in the 70s and delivered many babies at her home, which served as a de facto birth center here in Los Angeles. One of her birth assistants, who is also a Black woman, just recently passed away. And we were hoping that we were going to be able to sit down and talk with her about her experiences with Lola Coleman. But unfortunately, fortunately, she's an ancestor now, but we didn't get a chance to interview her. There was a Black midwife in LA that opened a birth center more contemporarily, sometime in the late 1990s. And so here we are now. That birth center is no longer here, and here we are now. And there are other folks that are becoming owners of birth centers, Black folks that are buying into some birth centers that do exist here in LA. And so in diversifying this field and also helping us bring more birth centers to Los Angeles County, which, by the way, is pretty big. If you don't know, Los Angeles County is huge, and we need as many birth centers. As one of my mentors says, we need a birth center, we need a midwife on every corner, because what we have juxtaposing that is a maternal, what's happening right now in our country is what's called maternal health deserts, which is just another way that people can't access care, that they don't have access to care. So unfortunately, yes, we have this maternal health crisis, Black maternal health crisis. The numbers of Black people, birthing people, Black women who are dying or having severe injury after birth is unfortunately not going down. New numbers just recently came out that says every other race maternal mortality is going down, but Black maternal mortality is not going down. So that is a huge problem. And we don't me personally, Kimberly Durdin speaking here, I'm not expecting the system that is broken to actually fix the problem. And so, as Allegra pointed to her life's work as a midwife being her life's work, I think that we both feel the same way, that this is work that needs to be done. We are highly invested in it because we are not waiting for someone else to fix the problem. We're putting ourselves out here as professionals and create a space and hold space for the problem to be solved with care like ours. And there's room for all folks who want to participate in this work in a loving manner, in a manner that's not disparities pimping. We need more birth workers of color. We need more Black birth workers. We need more doulas. We need more midwives. We need everybody. Our team is not, and thankfully, our team is so diverse. It started with Allegra and I, but as our practice grew, we knew that we needed more support, and we brought in two beautiful midwives that have amazing different backgrounds. Hiroko, who is of Japanese descent, she's born in Japan, has been living in Los Angeles for a very long time, and Aika Narumi, who is originally from Venezuela, Spanish speaking, who's here with us. And we all bring our cultural knowledge of midwifery, that is within all of our cultures. And we bring that to the table here and serve really everybody, because we're serving folks of color, we're serving Black folks, but we serve everybody. We have clients of every shade, color, hue, gender here at Kindred Space LA. And so
I would like to add that there is a Black maternal mortality crisis, and those crises are happening in hospitals. Those are not midwife-led births. Those are the over-medicalized births, is overwhelmingly C-sections and complications from C-sections. So we know that if we can reduce the amount of primary C-sections, especially for Black women, that birth will be safer for that person. That person is less likely to have a postpartum complication. And we also know that somebody is less likely to have a C-section if they're in the hands of midwives in any setting. So midwives really are a big part of the solution to this problem. And it's not doulas. Having a doula in the room while somebody bleeds out after a C-section is not going to stop that person, but having prevent that person from having that bad outcome or near miss or whatever it is. So incorporating more midwives, I think honestly, of any race is going to be better, right? It's like a lot of times Black women, right now, Black women are aware of the statistics when they're pregnant, and they are scared because they want to have a baby and they don't want to die. And so they're seeking people that they feel are going to give them the best care and have the most value for their life. And so a lot of Black women feel more comfortable in the hands of a Black midwife or somebody that they can identify with. But really it is it's a midwifery wide solution. And I think it's bigger than just race, right? People will get good care from midwives if they're white, if they're Japanese, if they're from Venezuela, if they're Black, because the midwifery model of care is rooted in holistic health and it's preventative care. And so we are really happy to be where we are in South Los Angeles. We're really happy to be where we are with the midwives on our team, and also to serve the community that we get to serve.
I appreciate all of that because it also illustrates the point that Japanese folks, Venezuelan folks, people from anywhere, midwifery care is not something that was just born out of Black American women making a case to serve Black. This is around the world. This is global. This has been forever. And I appreciate, Kim, the way you corrected my framing of Kindred Space LA and provided that history within Los Angeles. And you made a really good point. Not all of this was tracked, right? So we don't necessarily know the full history. So it's really not terribly fair to make any kind of grandiose statements about, where this fits into a greater context that is only partially known. But I do want to double click on race, because midwifery care can benefit anybody. I believe that. midwifery care in a healthy, normal situation is a preferred option to OBG hospital care. That's my opinion based on my homework. However, you said earlier, the numbers are going down. The mortality numbers are going down across the board, except with Black women. So there's a race component, so what is that race component? What does that mean? What do we do about that?
I would say midwifery care is most important for Black women because they have the highest risk of having a bad outcome in the traditional medical system.
Right. And I would say that the medical community, the medical care is built on a racist premise. We have institutionalized racism, systemic racism, which is how these institutions were built, how physicians have been trained. And, people talk a lot about there's this belief, and it's being taught to this day in medical schools, that Black people don't feel pain in the same way as other races. And so because we have this, it really is a racist system. Even the research is racist. I mean, I just found out recently there were poor studies done on the rates of anemia between Black people, white people, and other. And somehow someone came up with this metric that Black women can actually walk around anemic, but they're not really anemic because they're Black. So that doesn't really count for them. Like their numbers, and to be honest, or what the numbers do show when we talk about Black mortality is that Black women who are anemic are dying at a higher rate than other races due to complications from anemia in birth. That is a very easy fix. It's very easy to fix anemia. But when we said that for Black women, you're not really anemic when your numbers are here, then we're actually missing so much in the medical world. They're missing this. They're saying, oh, this woman's fine, when she's really not. And new studies have been done as recent as the 2000s that actually aren't being used, because that's how it goes, right? It takes forever in these institutions for this new information to kind of trickle down. So that's just a small example of the system itself is broken. And in order to fix the things that need to be fixed in the system, like literally majority of everything needs to actually be thrown in the trash, and it needs to kind of be redesigned, from a physiologic birth perspective, from a perspective of all peoples, of all genders, of all of that needs to be included in what we build as a new system. And the same with Black babies, right? Because they also have the higher infant mortality and infant morbidity. And so we don't have enough time to really pick it all apart, but everyone should be paying attention. And I'll just say this, that what benefits Black women, Black babies, is going to benefit everyone. If the system improves for Black folks, it's going to improve for everyone. So this is not just a Black folks problem. This is a problem for all of us.
And I think that is such an important point, because coming from a rare disease lens where I spend a lot of my time, you just hear rare disease and it sounds like something that's over there and probably doesn't really need a ton of attention. It's uncommon, it's unusual, doesn't affect me. Hold on. Rare diseases in general affect 1 in 10 people. That's the patient. And if we consider that each person has, I think it's like 2.3 is the statistics I've seen, support people in their life. Okay, so 3.3 out of 10 people are directly impacted by a rare disease. So the language we use and a lack of understanding sometimes creates just an incredible gap right up front. So I think this kind of clarity is extremely important. And I want to add one more point before I transition to a quick discussion, because we're going to come up on time, about Deliver Us, the documentary that connected the three of us in the first place. Now my only challenge is to remember the point I wanted to make before that, but it flew out of my head as soon as I queued up the documentary, so maybe we just have to plow ahead. Oh, no, the other point was that race and not class, because another interesting consideration is that there are examples of Black women suffering these kind of horrific, if not fatal outcomes across the class spectrum. Egypt Sherrod, she participates in our project. I believe Serena Williams. I mean, you don't get much more high profile than friggin' Serena Williams. And if she can't be believed, heard, respected as a full human,
Right.
then we're in a lot of trouble. But let's talk about the documentary and why did you agree to participate? You know, I was aware as I was listening to your brief origin stories that Jenny Callahan and Randy Matthews, the female first-time filmmakers of color who are driving this whole project, sort of had similar stories of like, I was doing this other thing, and then I had a birthing experience, and now I cannot not do this. Tell me a little bit about why you engaged in this project and what it's been like thus far. I know that's a big question.
You want to talk about that?
Randy and Jenny are kindred space moms, and we knew them when they were pregnant and when they were postpartum. And so having supported them into their, becoming moms and becoming activists and becoming filmmakers, it just felt like they were trustworthy to tell this story, because we get offers quite a bit, and it's kind of hard to know like what a person's intentions are when they ask for your time and your expertise. And so we already knew them because we had supported them in their experiences. So we really trust them to tell this story. We knew that they were going to do a good job.
Yeah. And, Jenny, I met when she had already birthed her child. I met her in the postpartum, and I was her lactation consultant, and I helped her with that, with her kid. And I was actually honored to be Randy's doula. That's how I met Randy. She used to come to our old Kindred Space LA, the old space that we had. And so she asked me to be her doula, and I attended her birth. And it was one of the last doula births I did, actually, as I was getting ready to focus on midwifery. And it was tough. It was tough because and as a matter of fact, it really continued to motivate me to become a licensed midwife, because I was, as a doula, and by the way, we think doulas are really great and really important. But the thing is that you're not a medical provider. So I could only watch, offer my suggestions, but watch and support her in her birth. But I didn't really have any kind of influence in medically over things that, were part of her experience. And it was tough. And it was just tough. It was long, it was tough. But out of that, grew this advocacy. And I think that's what happens to a lot of people. I mean, look at you, Patrick. You're here talking to some Black midwives, and you had an experience that made you probably even more, maybe it was the first time that you really even thought about this deeply as you went through your own experience. And what surprises me these days is how many people come to us and they do want to learn about midwifery. They do want to become midwives. They do want to become doulas. They want to be trained by us, and they haven't had a child, kind of like Allegra. She didn't have kids, but her story was, I was born in a birth center, right? And so anyway, to me, it's really interesting seeing folks that are learning about these kind of lines of work and feeling like they want to be involved in making a difference, and it's happening. So we're really excited about that. We have lots of interesting people who come to our doors and want to see what we're doing. They want to learn from us. I'm thinking of someone right now who's an amazing soon to be OB, also a doctor of public health. They're doing a double major, and they have been all up in Kindred Space volunteering. They've been a volunteer doula for some of our clients, and we just know that this person is going to go out and be the most amazing OB ever, because they have forgotten about these silos that we often put ourselves in or see ourselves in, and just kind of broke down the walls and said, I want to see what you guys are doing. And I know that they're going to bring this to their work when they become a doctor.
That's what it's all about, is paying it forward and making sure that the good work and practices are passed down to the next generation. That's how the system changes over time. To your point, the broken system isn't going to fix itself, but the people on the outside who are influencing the next generation, that's what changes it over time. I know I got to let you both go, so I just want to make the audience aware of one thing. It goes back to, Allegra, your story of essentially being born into this, quite literally, and even before your mother's spiritual role was identified, the spirituality was a word that came up for me. And Kim, you were talking about the space that's created and the space that you hold. I believe the woman's name is Nambia, and she is featured in the documentary.
Nyambi.
Pardon me, Nyambi. Sorry, Nyambi. Apologies for that. Nyambi's featured in the documentary quite prominently. She's an extraordinary, her just groundedness and openness. She's amazing as a character in a film. She's the kind of character you want to watch. And there's one particular scene between her and you, Kim.
She's the bomb. We love
I mean,
Niambi. She's
I
like
she is the
so
bomb.
great.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. But it's those kind of stories and characters like her that I'm excited for people to meet when they see Deliver Us and help them even more deeply appreciate the role that you both play in midwives all across the country. There's incredible work happening in states where we've got the first licensed midwife fighting the good fight, birthing centers opening in spite of all kinds of obstacles. So it's an adventure story, and you can learn more about it at deliverusdoc.com, or you can learn more about Kindred Space LA. What is the website? We'll have it in the program notes as well, but just shout it out if you wouldn't mind, Kim.
KindredSpaceLA.com.
Easy peasy, right? Why reinvent the wheel? All right, 10:40. I got to let you go. Kimberly, Durdin, Allegra Hill, Kindred Space LA, Deliver Us documentary. This was a great conversation. I want to find an excuse to do it again in the not too distant future. So let's find
Let's do
one.
it again.
Let's do it. We're opening a new center too, Kindred Space AV. Just want to shout that out. We are in the process of opening our doors in the Antelope Valley on the Lancaster area. So we're really excited about that. There is nothing out there like what we're bringing to the community. So we're really, really grateful for this opportunity.
Let's use that as an opportunity to reconnect, put a little more promotion and attention on that when it happens. So please stay in touch, and I'm sure the documentary will give us reasons to talk again soon.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Patrick.
Kimberly Durdin, Allegra Hill from Kindred Space LA, thank you so much for your time. If you are interested in learning more about their work, we'll have link in the program notes to Kindred Space LA, as well as to Deliver Us, the documentary. You can go to deliverusdoc.com or follow the link in the program notes, deliverusdoc.com, to learn more. All right, our fourth and final segment today, Amy Board, what do we have in store?
We've got two young women from the NYLI program at NBDF. NYLI is National Youth Leadership Institute. It's a phenomenal program, and these two are shining stars, if you will. So let's hear from Shanthi and Eliza. Listeners, I am here with two members of NBDF's NYLI program. Actually, we should all say that 3 times fast. NBDF, NYLI, NBDF, NYLI. That's actually a lot. Eliza and Shanthi, thank you so much for joining us. I am so excited to speak to you today, specifically about your experiences in NYLI, what made you want to join this leadership group with NBDF. But first of all, I guess, tell us a little bit about yourselves. How did you get involved in the bleeding disorder? Eliza, I'll start with you. How did you get involved with the bleeding disorder community? And why did NYLI seem like a good idea?
Sure. So I can start with telling a little bit about myself. So my name is Eliza. I was diagnosed with Glanzmann's thrombocythemia pretty shortly after birth. But I'd say most of my life, I wasn't really aware of the hemophilia or like larger bleeding disorders community. I knew there was like a hemophilia chapter, but like I didn't have hemophilia, so I didn't really feel connected to that community. That was the case about until 2020, 2021 during COVID. Our local chapter started doing a lot more virtual programming and started embracing like a lot more of the comprehensive, like we serve all bleeding disorders. So I got involved with a lot of their programming and really, really loved meeting the community and getting involved. So that led me to apply to the NYLI program in 2023. So since then, I've become a lot more involved and yeah, been meeting a lot of amazing people and getting involved.
That's so cool. Shanthi, how about you? How did you get involved in the community, and why did NYLI seem like a good idea?
Yeah, so I got diagnosed really late. I got diagnosed with von Willebrand's disease my freshman year of college. So
of college.
College. So yeah, I was 19. And yeah, pretty crazy story. I had bled kind of all of my life, but it wasn't until I had moved up to Boston to college. So I'm originally from Georgia. And I moved to Boston for school. And I had bled for almost a year straight at that point. So I saw an OB-GYN up here. And for the first time, they had mentioned, like, have you ever heard of von Willebrand's disease? And I was like, never heard of a bleeding disorder. Got tested. Turns out I had von Willebrand's disease. And that's where my journey really began. I actually more recently got diagnosed with factor VII deficiency as well. I got diagnosed this year. This past September. So yeah, my diagnosis journey is still ongoing. I'm still like getting routine checkups. I'm still getting genetic testing to figure all of this out. So I'm still going through the journey, but shortly after I got diagnosed with von Willebrand's disease, I was trying to figure out what that was and what that is, because my gynecologist, my hematologist, never really told me too much about it. Kind of just said, oh, it's just something that a lot of women have. That's it. Goodbye. Have a nice day. And so I ended up searching up what von Willebrand's disease was, and found NBDF's website and just kind of did a deep dive onto like what it's like living with a bleeding disorder, learning more about treatment options. And I stumbled upon the NYLI page, and I was like, wouldn't it be cool to meet other people my age with bleeding disorders? And so I applied on a whim because I was like very newly diagnosed, and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to get in because I just got diagnosed. But I ended up getting in, which was awesome. And I ended up meeting Eliza and all the other cohort members. And they were the very first people with bleeding disorders that I had ever met except me. None of my family members have bleeding disorders that I knew of back then. And Eliza and all the other cohort members, I was just so shocked. I was like, oh my gosh, you guys have bleeding disorders? I have a bleeding disorder. This is so cool. Like, you guys are the first people I've ever met with bleeding disorders. So it was just such like a great experience to meet them, and I'm so inspired by them, continuously so inspired by them. And it's always so good to be around people your age and like talk to each other about what it's like to have a bleeding disorder and how to navigate this together.
Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about the program. It is NYLI, I should mention. It has shifted over the years, but in your cohort, what were some of the things that you guys really looked at? What were some of the things you wanted to really engage with? Tell me a little bit about what it was like.
Sure. So I can go ahead. So the NYLI is the National Youth Leadership Institute at the NBDF. So it's a 2-year-long program that really immerses young adults in the bleeding disorders community into many different avenues of leadership. So they focus on 3 different tracks: advocacy, research, and education. I'm currently in the education track, but all members of NYLI get a lot of training on like leadership styles or like conflict resolution or how to do networking. So just a lot of like basic things you might expect from leadership training, but also really cool opportunities and events to attend, like the National Bleeding Disorders annual Bleeding Disorders Conference, which has been such an amazing opportunity to meet people and get involved.
Cool. And Shanthi, tell me a little bit about. Yeah, you guys travel a lot. Don't you guys like travel a lot? Don't you guys get like together and you do certain trips together, just y'all in your cohort, but then you also get to go to conferences? Is that still the case? Shanthi, do you guys get to meet up like twice a year or something like that?
Yeah, so when we first got into the program, we had an onboarding, which is where we met each other for the first time and talked about what the program entails, where we had some of our leadership training, like Eliza was mentioning, where we like learned like tips about our resume, how to be leaders, like how to navigate like networking at the annual Bleeding Disorders Conference. And that was that conference was in Washington, D.C. And so we basically like were like talking to each other about how we would navigate maybe like networking with like providers, networking with different nurses, community members, like how that would look like, and how to really put ourselves out there as leaders. And so that was the first time, like, for example, for me, like that was the first time I had met all the cohort members and like learned more about bleeding disorders. Like I had known a little bit about von Willebrand's disease and hemophilia a little bit, but I had not known about, like, for example, like platelet deficiencies and like Glanzmann's thrombocythemia and some of the more ultra rare disorders. Like that was a very eye-opening experience for me to hear about what it was like living with, for example, like Eliza living with Glanzmann's. And I remember at not last year's, but the year before's BDC in DC, for the first time, like we had like to think about each other's bleeding disorders, and what we thought each other's bleeding disorders meant. And that was such an eye-opening experience for me because I had gotten Glanzmann's, and I wasn't able to really talk too much about Glanzmann's. I realized I didn't really know too much about Glanzmann's. So it was just it's just such a great experience, not only to learn about each other's bleeding disorders and really get to know each other and what it's like to live with each other's bleeding disorders, but also, like, for example, like networking. We do that at and we did that at the BDC conference, both in Atlanta and in DC, the two conferences we've gotten to go to with our cohort. We also are getting to go to Washington Days this year, which is phenomenal. We get to do a lot of that advocacy. But also we've been able to speak on panels, which is really cool. We've been able to talk at BDC this year on different panels. I know Eliza spoke at a lived experience experts panel, which was so great to just hear from Eliza on what it's like to live with Glanzmans and also be involved in the Community Voices Research Project. So it's really amazing to hear from other members, and I'm honestly like very inspired by them and all the amazing things that they've done this past BDC and honestly beyond.
That's so cool.
I gotta say, don't let Shanthi fool you. She's doing amazing things of her own. She's actually started her own bleeding disorders chapter at her school. So yeah, she's definitely doing amazing things too.
Oh, that's so cool. Well, we had a tip that you guys, this cohort, was like the best cohort that NBDF has seen in a long time. And so that was really exciting to hear. Eliza, I specifically want to ask you about Glanzmans because, you know, that's been a thing here in the bleeding disorders community. You know, the organization was the National Hemophilia Foundation for a long time. Speaking of von Willebrand's disease, that wasn't necessarily inclusive, even though VWD was much more, you know, included rather than like Glanzmans. Glanzmans has always been something that the bleeding disorder community has felt was really under their wing. In terms of leadership and your future and learning now the ins and outs of things, the advocacy, the leadership angle, the funding angle of our community, what are your hopes for the Glanzmans community in particular of, you know, raising awareness, getting the treatment and access that y'all need? What are your thoughts?
That's a great question, and it is very encouraging to see more focus on it, specifically over the last few years. It's interesting that you bring that up because I was on a panel last year with some company representatives asking questions about the patient burden of living with Glanzmans, and they were shocked. Like, they had no idea. So even that was a step in the right direction of like educating people what it's like to live with Glanzmans, because not every bleed is reported, but yet the patient burden is still there that like doctors and healthcare providers aren't aware of. So that in itself is really encouraging. But towards the future, seeing people get more excited about developing a cure or treatment for Glanzmans. Right now, there's a clinical study happening, which is super exciting. I mean, that it just seems like for so long, we've just kind of lived like there's no treatment options. There's really not a lot of visibility, and now it seems for the first time in a long time there's definitely getting some visibility on these issues. So I'm really encouraged and really hopeful for the future.
Cool. Shanthi, I think it is so, I mean, not cool that you were diagnosed when you were a freshman in college. That's not cool. But I think you have I shouldn't say cool, I should say you have a unique perspective in that you haven't been raised in the bleeding disorder community, which a lot of, especially boys with hemophilia, have been raised in that community. You have like a really unique perspective coming in. What is your perspective on our community at the moment with women in particular? It's a hot topic, if you will, like really getting the access and treatment that we need. What is your perspective coming in? Are we on the right track, or there's still some things that we need to do to make sure that all women are able to get the access and treatment that they need?
I think this is a really good question, especially since WGPPM is a huge thing that NBDF is doing.
And tell everybody what that means, acronym queen.
Acronym, WGPPM stands for Women, Girls, and the People with the Potential to Menstruate, and the people who have had or have the potential to menstruate. So it's a very inclusive term, which is really great. It's actually a step in the right direction because there are people that, for example, have had hysterectomies who are now like at the age where they are now at menopause, that don't feel like they are included in just like women and girls bleed. And they've bled, and their stories are so valid. And I think it's just a step in the right direction in terms of inclusivity. But I think that there's a lot more that can be done in terms of WGPPM, in terms of bleeding for all women and girls and the people with the potential to menstruate. For example, I think that there should be like just general awareness on periods and destigmatization of periods. I think that a lot of times different communities don't see periods as something that is normal. As a South Asian myself, I can speak to that. For example, my mom grew up in a space where she had to sit outside whenever she had her period. And that was normalized. And she actually recently found out that she has von Willebrand's disease too at the age of 50. And so kind of seeing that growing up, she wanted to, break that intergenerational trauma of, I'm not going to let my daughter go through something similar. But still, talking with my extended family about periods is something that's still very stigmatized and still something that we don't really openly talk about. And so a lot of my family doesn't know that bleeding disorders exist. And so I think that we definitely should be doing a better job, not only on a national level, but also an international level of period awareness and also bleeding disorder awareness as a whole. And also that a lot of people don't have access to care because of the areas that they're living in. Yes. My family comes from a very, very rural town, and so there's not even good access to healthcare. And I think about that on a national standpoint in the United States, where there's a lot of rural communities that not only are facing the stigmatization of periods, but also are not getting the proper healthcare, are not seeing IUDs as an option, are not seeing are not seeing different things as an option. And so I think that's a huge thing. And I also think that women in joint health, when I was first diagnosed with bleeding disorders, my first hematologist told me that it was impossible for me to have a bleed in my joints or bleed in my muscles. I ended up having a bleed in my joints, and I ended up having muscle bleeds. And I did not know that there were muscle bleeds or joint bleeds, and I ended up not feeling my leg for weeks because I didn't know how to recognize that. And so I think there's so much stigma, or not really stigma, but there's so much misconception around women who have bleeding disorders. They don't have joint bleeds. They don't have these like crazy bleeds like men do. And so I think that this mild label that women oftentimes come across is really harmful. And so I really hope that NBDF or, the bleeding disorders community can really start to go beyond mild and start to look at bleeding disorders phenotypically rather than, you're mild, so we don't really want to treat you. But I really want to brag about Eliza really quick because
look at you guys just lifting each other up.
She's a girl boss. I love Eliza because she's so humble. She doesn't like to brag about herself, but I love to brag about her because she's amazing. And she's such a leader in the community. She was this year's Susan Skinner Scholar. And she does so much for the World Federation, and she is such a leader. I always look up to her, and I'm always coming to her about bleeding disorders advice. And so I just want to shout out Eliza really quick because she's such an inspiration, and I think she deserves all the praise.
Oh my gosh. You know what I should have done? I'm so mad about this interview. I should have just had you guys talk about each other. That's what I should have done. I would have been like, okay, y'all, like just let you, love up on each other. That would have been great. No, you guys are very, what a joy to speak to. I mean, this is going to sound patronizing, but like what a joy to speak to like young people who have so much energy and passion and integrity behind their work and the work that they're doing for their communities with their own, lived experience with their health. I just think it's fantastic. And the role models that you guys are going to be to the younger women that are coming up in the community, those girls that need that. I just think it's so great. And you know what, to tell you the truth, you're also role models for a lot of older women, the older generation that never really took it. Like they never were believed. And like, this is really cool. So bravo. I'm getting goosebumps and all the things. I want to do like Patrick wrote this and he was like, please do this rapid fire thing. I think this will be great. I would love to ask you some rapid fire questions real quick to end. Think like short and snappy. I would love to get both of your answers. But I think this is great. What NYLI skill do you use the most?
I would say for me personally, is really that elevator pitch when I'm talking to people. Really like, introducing myself, who I am, what my bleeding disorder is, how I got in the community, and like why I want to connect with you, why I think that us connecting would be such a great idea. Is kind of how I start conversations off. And honestly, I think it's helped me in a lot of ways where I can just like connect with people really quickly. But also like, let's exchange information. Let's go on a coffee date, coffee chat, to maybe even get to know each other in a more lengthier conversation.
Ugh, love that. Eliza, what about you? What's the skill you use the most?
It's given me the confidence to speak up. Honestly, I'm a very naturally like shy and introverted person, and the leadership training and the opportunities I've been exposed to with NYLI has just given me the confidence to like walk up to somebody and introduce myself or make those connections or go out on a limb and start something new. So that has been absolute key.
Ugh, that's awesome. All right. Last one. One piece of advice for aspiring NYLI members.
Get involved in your community. Find your local chapter. If you don't have a local chapter, reach out to the NBDF and see what resources are available. And if you want, I would definitely encourage applying to NYLI. It's an amazing program.
That's awesome. What about you, Lovey?
I honestly would echo that, take part in as many opportunities as you can. I think that's kind of what really helped me. Like I kind of was just like, any opportunity that'll come to me, I will grab, just because I was diagnosed so late. I felt like I was behind. So I was like, let me just take all the opportunities I can get. And honestly, it has been so great. Taking up all those opportunities, meeting new people, hearing from the community members, like being part of the community. It's just been such a great experience. So I would just say cherish it while you can. Cherish NYLI while you can, because it was an amazing 2 years. Yeah, almost a year, 2 years now. And it went by so quickly. So all I can say is definitely cherish it while you can.
Oh, it's awesome. You guys, thank you so much for popping on the podcast and giving a big NYLI shout out and a Lady Bleeder shout out. We love a Lady Bleeder shout out. And I personally will see the both of you at Washington Days. I'll be there, so I'll get to maybe hug you in person, which is great. And I'm just looking forward to like seeing where your futures go and how you become leaders in this community. I'm really excited. Thank you guys so much for coming on.
Thank you again, Shanthi and Eliza, and thanks as well to Trevor Martin, Dr. Lemon, Kimberly, and Allegra for joining us on this jam-packed episode of the Bloodstream Podcast, which again would not be possible without the support of our presenting sponsor, Takeda. You can visit bleedingdisorders.com to learn more. And we also have to give a shout out to our segment sponsor, CSLBehring, for the gene therapy segment. And we would like to thank Genentech for helping make possible Trevor Martin's appearance today. Okay, we could not produce the show without these wonderful sponsors and their support, Amy Board, and we're going to continue to produce this wonderful show thanks to that support. The next one coming out on May 9th. What's happening on May 9th?
I think it's going to be baller. I think we have VWD clinical trial information. When have we had VWD clinical trial information? Patrick, tell us all about it. Holy smokes.
That's a nice sentence to be able to say. Yeah, well, we interviewed the CEO of HEMAB. His name is Benny Sorensen. He was a wonderful interview guest, highly knowledgeable. His head's in the right space. His reason for doing this kind of work is just totally aligned with what we do and why we do it. And yes, HEMAB is doing some pretty remarkable things in von Willebrand disease, as well as in other rare factor deficiencies. So that's going to be a centerpiece of the May 9th episode. If you're not already, please subscribe to the Bloodstream Podcast to have that delivered to you the moment it goes live.
We love that. We love that. Loyal listeners, as always, email us at mailbag@bloodstreammedia.com. So many of you are starting to do it, and we love it. So keep it up and find us on social media.
We're in all the places, and that will do it for this jam-packed episode of the Bloodstream Podcast. I am your host, Patrick James Lynch.
And I'm your other host, Amy Board.
And until next time, take self-care of yourself.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, y'all.
I look around and don't know how I ever got this lucky. In a starter house, sitting on the couch with a perfect girl.